Folks, Donald Trump's polling nightmare just got a hell of a lot worse because the New York Times Siena College Poll, perhaps the most individually reputable in the country, just dropped, and it is historically disastrous for Trump. He is underwater on literally every issue and only has a 42% approval rating. This is terrible for Trump and great for us, so please pop the popcorn and pop the champagne bottles. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Folks, not good for Donald Trump. Just to give you an overview of where he stands, excluding the New York Times Siena College Poll. This is the Silver Bulletin by Nate Silver. After a string of bad polls, most recently from YouGov, Pew, and Fox News, Trump's net approval rating in the Silver Bulletin average dropped from minus 5.1 at the start of the week to minus 7.4 today. He's still doing better than he was at this point during his first term. Trump sat at a net approval rating of negative 9.2 back then, but that might not be true for much longer. Okay, and this is just the overall aggregate, according to Nate Silver. We'll get into the new New York Times poll that Nate Silver has not factored in just a second because it just dropped. 52% disapproval in the aggregate, 44% approval, in the aggregate. So, brutal. 7-point differential in favor of his disapproval. Now let's look at this bombshell new release from the Times-Sienna poll. Voters see Trump's use of power as overreaching, Times-Sienna poll finds. Skepticism has grown of his efforts to expand his authority and of his handling of issues long seen as strengths for him, including the economy and immigration. Percent of voters who said the following words describe Trump's second term in office well. 66% said chaotic. A supermajority say chaotic. 59%, nearly 60%, say scary, and only 42% say exciting. Voters believe Trump is overreaching with his aggressive efforts to expand executive power, and they have deep doubts about some of the signature pieces of his agenda, the New York Times Siena College Poll found. The turbulent early months of Trump's administration are seen as chaotic and scary by majorities of voters, even many who approve of the job he's doing. Voters do not view him as understanding the problems of their daily lives and have soured on his leadership as he approaches his 100th day in office. Trump's approval rating sits at 42%. His standing is historically low for a president this early in a term, but it is in line with his stubborn unpopularity, which did not prevent him from sweeping the battleground states in last year's election. Now, however, voters express dimming confidence about Trump's handling of some of the top issues that propelled him back to the White House, including the economy and immigration, even as most Americans support deportations. Only 43% said they approved of how he has managed the economy this term, a serious erosion on an issue long seen as a strength. Trump's pursuit of widespread tariffs, which has caused stock market drops and gyrations, was opposed by 55% of voters, including 63% of independents. That's a bellwether. That's terrible for him. Taken together, the survey's findings show that any second-term honeymooning for Trump is over. His approval rating among crucial independent voters is now at a woeful 29%. Voters said he had, quote, gone too far on issue after issue. His tariffs, his immigration enforcement, his cuts to the federal workforce. Broad numbers of independent voters sided with Democrats in believing he had overreached. Overall, a 54% majority said Trump was, quote, exceeding the powers available to him, including 16% of Republicans and 62% of independent voters. Douglas Williams, 56, a cattle rancher and banker in rural Missouri who voted for Trump in each of the last three elections, still supports much of his agenda. But he worries that Trump is, quote, pushing the envelope with some of his executive orders. It's tracking, this is a little section here, it's tracking Trump's first 100 days. Quote, now, do I agree with the goal? Do I agree with the result? Probably, Mr. Williams said. Quote, but I'm a constitutionalist enough to be at least a little bit concerned about how far we push that. For some of Trump's supporters, the chaos in his refusal to follow norms are part of his appeal, if not the point. Among those who approve of Trump, nearly half saw the recent months as chaotic. About 40% of Republican voters said that Trump should still be able to do what they think is best, even if that might go outside existing rules. And 8% of voters who approved of Trump said his actions were, quote, a unique threat to our system of government. Quote, sometimes you have to break the rules, said Michael Craig, 63, a retired Republican from outside German Hills, Illinois. So on a sidebar here, and I imagine if we were to follow Michael Craig, the next time a Democratic president were in office and ask him the same questions, he'd have a very different story. Unfortunately, with too many partisans, only their preferred candidate gets to break the rules. Still, voters overall are questioning not just Trump's methods, but also his policy agenda. So let's look at this. Do you approve, green, or disapprove? Looks like tan, peach, of the way Trump is handling his job as president. 42% approved, 54% disapprove, minus 12 points. Immigration, he's underwater even there by minus 4 points, 47-51. Managing the federal government, 44-52. The economy, 43-55. Again, that's minus 12 points. Trade with other countries, 42-53, minus 11 points. Foreign conflicts, 40-54, minus 14 points. The war between Russia and Ukraine, 35-56%, minus 21 points. The case involving Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he's underwater by 21 points on this, 31-52. He's underwater on every major issue. About half the voters and about 60% of independents said they disapproved of Trump's handling of trade with other countries. The federal workforce, the war between Russia and Ukraine, and the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a migrant in Maryland who was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador as part of Trump's immigration crackdown. On foreign affairs, 68% of voters said the country mostly benefited from alliances and trade, while only 24% said the country was mostly harmed by them. And more voters said they opposed Trump's executive orders rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the government more than supported them, even as the DEI issue has pushed Democrats into a defensive crouch. Voters do not seem to believe that Trump empathizes with their struggles. After spending much of last year promising to immediately lower prices, he and his allies have urged patience and tried to brace the country for short-term economic pain. So again, right there, Trump hoisted himself by his own damn petard by lying to the American people and his voters for months, saying, on day one, I'm going to end the war. On day one, I'm going to end inflation. On day one, I'm going to bring everything down. He lied, flat out lied, and should be held politically liable for his lie. He should suffer political consequences for his lie. No, you should not grade him on a curve. Nobody should. He promised you to do something. He failed to deliver. And it was a stupid promise to begin in the first place, to make in the first place, but he made it nonetheless because he wanted your damn vote. And now, because he set the expectation so high and he is just totally shitting the bed, he's suffering the backlash. Only 44% of voters, including a meager 31% of independents, said he, quote, understands the problems facing people like you. Broad majorities said they would prefer to place limits on exactly the kinds of powers that Trump has tried to exercise. 61% of voters, including 33% of Republicans, so one-third, said that a president should not be able to impose tariffs without authorization from Congress. And again, I imagine that would change among Republicans to quite high, a broad majority even among Republicans if it were a Democrat president. Again, sadly, too much of the GOP has become an authoritarian cult of personality. But even 33%, one-third, say that, yeah, Congress should take back its tariff power. 54%, including 26% of Republicans, said a president should not be able to eliminate programs enacted by Congress. Again, just kind of a no-brainer. Do you want a Democratic president to be able to get rid unilaterally of programs you like without congressional approval? Use your head, people. It's good that at least a majority agree with this. 63%, including 40% of Republicans, said a president should not be able to deport illegal immigrants who have protested Israel. 63%, that's great, should be higher. 73% of voters, including 56% of Republicans, said the president should not be able to send American citizens to prison in El Salvador, as Trump has threatened to do. Okay, so even more than half of Republicans say, yeah, probably shouldn't be able to deport people, American citizens, to El Salvador, though it's sad that nearly half, 44%, seem to be okay with it. Again, it's a cult. And as Trump's administration has veered towards open defiance of court orders, a sky-high 76% of voters and 61% of Republicans said a president should not be able to ignore the Supreme Court. Wow. Do you think the president of the United States should or should not be able to do each of the following, or are you not sure? So green and peach. Forgive student debt. 41% say should, 37% say not. Okay. Impose tariffs without authorization from Congress, 28-61 in terms of should not. Grant legal status to undocumented immigrants, 24% to 53%. Should not eliminate government programs enacted by Congress. 21 to 54%. Should not deport legal immigrants who have protested Israel. 17 to 63%. Should not send U.S. citizens to prison in El Salvador. 10% to 73% say not. Ignore Supreme Court ruling. 6% to 76%. Wow. Overall, 54% of voters said Trump's changes with the country's political and economic systems had, quote, gone too far, with 63% of independent voters feeling that way. And 50% of voters said the upheaval he had brought to the nation's political and economic systems was a bad thing. Only 36% said the changes were good. Do you think the president of the United States should or should not be able to send U.S. citizens to prison in El Salvador? So again, green and beige. All respondents, 10 to 73, say should not. 8% of is that what it says? That what it says here? No, 2%. It looks like 2% of Democrats and 90% say should not. 2% say yes. 11% of independents say yes, but 73% say no. Republicans, 21%. Again, 1/5 of Republicans think that the president should be able to send people to El Salvador. Again, I imagine that number would change if a Democrat were in power, which you should be thinking about these things when you set the president. One of the most troubling numbers for Trump is the share of voters who believe his policies have hurt them personally. Voters are more than twice as likely to say his policies have hurt them as helped them. This is a reversal from last fall when many voters across demographic groups said his policies during his first term had helped them. Trust in Trump and the economy was a key ingredient to his 2024 victory. A Times-Sienna poll 1 year ago showed that 64% of voters fondly remembered how he handled the economy as president. Yet now only 43% of voters gave him positive marks on an issue for the start of his term. Voters remain deeply unhappy with the economy, even if they're divided over who to blame. Despite Trump's short tenure, equal numbers of voters believe he is responsible for the economic conditions they face as those who see President Biden as accountable. A similar share said neither man was responsible. And according to other polls, more Americans see Trump as responsible than Biden, which they should. So this, quite frankly, is actually kind of good news for Trump, even though it's really not. More Americans should blame Trump than Biden, and yet it's about a 50-50. Still bad for Trump on the whole, but it could be worse. At the same time, far more voters believe that Trump has made the economy worse since taking office, 50%, than better, 21%. Negative feelings about the economy spanned every race, level of education, and region of the country, with less than 1% rating the economy as excellent and 76% saying it was fair or poor. Still, despite the upheaval in the markets, those views are largely unchanged since October. Trump supporters seem mostly happy to give him more time to see how his economic agenda, especially on tariffs, play out. Quote, I've actually thought, well, I'm 59. I don't need a whole lot of stuff, and I'm not going to buy a whole lot of stuff. So for me, I would just sit back and let it ride for a while, said Tracy Carson, a retiree and independent voter in Wisconsin. Quote, the aluminum thing with Canada scared me a little because I'm a big Diet Coke drinker. But I think he's using it as a tactic to make things fair and try to make a deal. But he's always all about the deal. One of Trump's signature policies, mass deportations, continued to hold a majority public support. And although he received negative marks for his deportation and immigration of Mr. Abrego Garcia in El Salvador, views of his handling of immigration policy remain relatively similar to what they were a year ago. The policy of deporting people living in the United States illegally back to their home countries garnered 54% support, including from 18% of Democrats. Still, voters overall viewed Trump's handling of immigration negatively, with 47% approving and 51% disapproving. So, in other words, this is a meaningful distinction. What the Times is saying is, in theory, this could be politically fertile ground for Trump. But his actual policies, what he's actually doing with this, is bad. They approve of the theory. They are underwater. They hate the execution. So, no, he doesn't get credit for this. This is what they're saying is, you could be doing this in a way we like, but you're not doing this in a way we like. So, again, bad news for Trump. The poll showed the Democrats begin the long march towards next year's midterms with a glimmer of hope. Among all voters, 47% say they would rather vote for a Democrat in the House, compared with 44% for a Republican candidate. Voters are clearly unhappy with the role played by Elon Musk, the world's richest man and a senior White House advisor. With mixed success, he's overseen drastic cuts to federal agencies through the so-called Department of Government Efficiency and battled with cabinet secretaries over the scope of his authority. Just 35% of voters viewed Musk favorably, and perhaps even more revealingly, attaching his name to his actions made them even less popular. The Times asked 2 questions about cuts by Doge, and the spending reductions were more popular when Musk's name was not included. Adam Schechter, a tech specialist in Springfield, Virginia, who voted for Trump last year, said he supported much of Trump's agenda, but was concerned about the, quote, very messy way he was going about it. Quote, a chainsaw, as you might say, Mr. Schechter said 2 months after Musk wielded a literal chainsaw to promote his cuts. Quote, the way it's all haphazardly handled has not been something I generally approve of. He was uneasy, too, about the, quote, consolidation of federal power in the executive branch. And this is the key quote. Quote, I didn't like it under Biden. I don't really like it under Trump. Now, I would argue there was nothing like the concentration of executive power under Biden as compared to what we see from Trump. Trump's is way worse. But yeah, folks, this is disastrous. Perhaps the most reputable individual poll in the country dropping, and it is brutal for Trump. If you look at people reacting to this, political experts even on social media, there's those saying that they have never seen a poll this bad, a major poll this bad, this early in a president's second term or in their term period. This is disastrous for Trump. It truly is, which means, in my opinion, it's good news for America. Now, the bad news is he's still going to be in office these next 4 years, whether we like it or not, because there is nothing this man can do. Nothing that would cause a Republican majority in the House of Representatives to impeach or a supermajority of senators to convict. Nothing. Hopefully, Democrats can retake the House in 2026 and, yes, start impeachment proceedings. No, Republicans will not vote for it because there's nothing this man could do that will cause them to find their spine. But again, this is brutal news for Trump, and Democrats need to do whatever they can to politically benefit from it. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.